And now, it's time to sit back and enjoy the Two True Freaks Internet Radio Broadcast.
Attention, people of Earth. Do not resist us. All who oppose us shall be annihilated. We command the most powerful army of monsters in the universe. They are sure to defeat your Earth monsters. All those who are hearing this are now under the control of the Earth Destruction Directive.
Hello everyone and welcome to Earth Destruction Directive. I am your host as always, Mr. Luke Giaconetti. I'd like to thank everyone for downloading and listening to this very special Gaiden episode. And we're not covering a piece of media today. Today instead we have someone we've talked about a fair bit here on the podcast and to sit down with us for a little bit. We're sitting down with the creator of the indie Gaikaiju comic Stomped, Mr. Ross Radke. Ross, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Oh yeah, no problem. It's funny. I just as a little bit of background, I actually missed Stomped on the first Kickstarter, and my a good friend of mine who is Big Five Army is what he goes by, on Twitter. He sent me a link to these. He's like, hey, these look right up your alley, and right around the time. I was able to reach out to you and purchase them digitally, the first two issues, and really liked them. We covered them here on the podcast last year, and we did I was part of the third issue Kickstarter, and then you were telling us that we've got the fourth issue Kickstarter coming up very soon as we're recording this, and I for one am very excited about what's coming in the fourth issue of this series.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited. It's been a long time coming.
So, Ross, tell me a little bit about yourself and your background. Where are you from? How are you doing now? What's going on?
Yeah, I grew up near Seattle, Washington, and I went to film school at Montana State University. And after graduating, I worked actually in retail for about 10 years. And I'd say starting around 2015 was when I really started getting into comic books and started building my portfolio. I've been drawing my whole life and have always loved using art to tell stories. And so I kind of started getting really serious about comics as a potential career path, and started taking my portfolio to Emerald City Comic Con and Rose City Comic Con, and then. At the end of 2019, I was working still like 70-hour work weeks at Walmart and doing that grind. And I knew I was never going to have time to finish any projects that I started. So I decided to try to do something that was in an anthology format and see if I could reach out to other artists to collaborate with. So that was kind of where kind of Stomped started and why it has the format that it does. So then in 2020, I did two Kickstarters for the first two issues, and that were both, moderately successful or modestly successful, I should say, for someone who's such a new creator doing this for the first time. And then the issues 3 and 4 got delayed a year as I had some other stuff I was working on in 2021. But yeah, we successfully raised funds for issue 3 earlier this year, and the fourth issue is the final anthology style issue that I had planned way back in 2019.
Yes, very cool. And those who follow Earth Destruction Directive on YouTube know I did a quick unboxing of number 3, which we're going to cover in the next couple of months here. And it's such a neat and novel looking series. So you said that you started, really getting into comics as a career path in 2015. Were you into comics as a kid?
Yeah, I wasn't a hardcore collector. Like, I wasn't a weekend warrior, but I definitely always had comics growing up. I had a lot of the Archie Ninja Turtles and some odd X-Men and Spider-Man here and there that I would read. And then when I was in high school, kind of around like the the Bendis New Avengers and Ultimate Spider-Man kind of era. That was when I started getting really more into comics as a fan and a reader. I was following both those series, and then I also got into the Hellboy series as well around that time, and continued being a big reader through college. But really, that first Comic-Con that I went to, 2015, was really when my eyes were open to just how huge and diverse and eclectic the comic book industry really is. And I really started to take a deep dive after that to try to catch up on things that I'd missed and discover things I'd never thought to read before. So.
Yeah. And Emerald City, I'm based on the East Coast, so our big con here in the Carolinas is Heroes Con in Charlotte, North Carolina. Of course, there's big cons down in Atlanta and Florida as well. But I've always heard good things about Emerald City Comic Con, and I have some friends on the West Coast that's kind of where their primary loyalty lies on that scene. Let me flip the script a little bit here. So, how did you get interested in monsters? I'm well documented as a monster fan from my childhood, but not everyone gets into Daikaiju when they're a wee lad. So how about yourself?
Yeah, it's funny. Monsters in a general sense. I mean, I know sometimes my mom will send me pictures of artwork I drew when I was, a toddler, and I was drawing monsters from that. As soon as I could hold a pencil, I was or a marker. I was doodling creatures of all sorts, mummies, ghosts, giant lizards, whatever. So that's always been something that was like just part of being a kid, like doodling on all my homework and getting in trouble from my teachers because there's more creatures on my homework than actual answers sometimes. And but in terms of like the actual Daikaiju genre, that's actually more recent for me. I've always been aware of Godzilla and obviously like Power Rangers. I was the perfect age when Power Rangers came to the States. I can remember the episode that introduced Lord Zed and the Green Ranger. Like me and a bunch of friends all went to a buddy's house and like we watched it live, and it was a really big deal. So obviously that had a pretty big influence on me. But like I hadn't actually, other than the 98, Hollywood Godzilla, I hadn't really watched a lot of those type of films until I started planning Stomped, and I decided that if I was going to play in this genre, I really wanted to take a deep dive and know what I was getting into and like really understand it from the perspective of a diehard fan. So I think around that time too is after the first couple issues came out, you had reached out to me, and I'd already started this journey of watching all these films, and but then I started listening to your podcast as well, and that kind of helped guide me along the way.
Well, I'm glad to be able to help out. I know I've been following you. You have a very long thread on Twitter of all your Daikaiju film thoughts as you've been watching through the. First, it was the Godzilla series, starting back with Gojira, and I've been following that. It's always interesting. Again, since it's for me, it's been for most of my life that I can remember. It's always fascinating to get the opinions and thoughts of someone who's new to the genre, right? And I see that a little bit because I see it sometimes with my kids, but I also see it sometimes with listeners, right? That they're like, oh, I had never given this much thought, or I hadn't watched one of these a Godzilla movie since I was a kid. So it is really a fascinating genre that I think doesn't get the big giants, no pun intended, of the genre kind of dominate it so much that it's hard to think about it outside of those terms. That was one of the things that drew me in to Stomped, is that it's such an original concept, even in the wake of like the Monsterverse and Pacific Rim and other kaiju projects that have sprung up in the last decade or so. Stomped as a series is really, especially this anthology format, was really interesting and unique to me. So how did Stomped kind of come about? What was the genesis of Stomped?
So the start was Emerald City Comic Con every year does an art book called Monsters and Dames. And so just for fun, I did an illustration fitting that theme. it wasn't submitted to the art book or anything. I just did it for fun, of a young woman with pink hair and tattoos, and then behind her is a Space Needle with a big monster impaled on the top of the Space Needle. And so I had originally just done that as like a one-off illustration, but I kind of, it sparked some ideas, and I kind of rolled it around in my head for a few years. I think I did that back in 2015 when I did that one. So it was gestating for a while as I was kind of doing other projects and working my day job. And I kind of came up with this story for this character who was the only superhero, in quotations, in this world that was being attacked by giant monsters. And I had an outline for, something that I planned to do eventually that would be like a graphic novel or a miniseries. But like I mentioned earlier, I knew I was never going to be able to tackle something on my own of this length. So I thought it would be fun to put together an anthology and reach out to other artists and kind of have it be sort of like a writing workshop for myself, where I would write these stories that were in different little monster subgenres, and have them all set in the same shared world, but have them each have a little different flavor of types of stories that I thought would be fun to tell. And so that was the start. And the other thing is just, financially and where I was at in my life, like I couldn't bite off more than I could chew. So I decided to break up the anthology. I'd originally written 8 different stories, and I decided to release them 2 at a time as sort of a double feature issue.
Right.
And break it up that way.
Yeah. Well, I can say that, the story Blind Date in issue 1, which is story and art by you, and that introduces us to the character of Kim Corrigan, who is she's to me such a great character because she's so believable. She's relatable, right? Not just in her appearance, because like you say, she's the air quotes up to the mic superhero, but she has a body like a normal woman, right? But she's also just believable in her persona, right? I love the dialogue when they're on the date here in the coffee shop, and she's just very, kind of interested, but not really, And I think a lot of ladies can probably relate to that. With the anthology format, there was 2 things that kind of struck me. First was, monster comics going back to the 40s and 50s, even up through, thinking of mystery and horror comics up through the 70s and 80s. The anthology was the standard format, right? That was, you get, a few 7 or 8 page stories, usually 3 or 4 of them, depending on the length of the book. And depending on the publisher, like Atlas would do giant monsters a lot. That Atlas has this huge roster of monsters, the most well-known, of course, being Groot at this point. Whereas other publishers would do more, standard universal type monsters or what have you. So I really was attracted to the idea of the anthology because it reminded me of the old monster comics. But it also, lets you explore different avenues and different angles on this world. The way I described it was kind of like the new Wild West, because this was such a new frontier that the world was in, that it's been a couple of decades, and we've had these kaiju, and mankind has not really been successful in repelling the fact that kaiju now walk among them. I said so. Again, that was kind of the way that it struck me, as like the Wild West or a brave new world, and I really liked that. I just I don't know if that was anything that you were consciously doing, or if it was just an examination of how introducing this new type of super species into the world would how that would have the ramifications.
Yeah, I was interested in kind of looking at it from a very human angle. The idea I had for Kim Corrigan's story is very very grounded, and I wanted to kind of I made a few rules for myself for when I was coming up with the world of Stomped. One of them was no giant robots.
Yes.
which is something that I just thought, that's a step into a certain type of genre that has been done, 100 times really well. And so I thought, just take that off the table and see what I can come up with just monsters living in today's world. Like, if monsters started appearing on the planet gradually in the 2000s, where would we be at today? How would that have influenced society, pop culture, technology, science, all these things? And I kind of look at it similarly to, I treat them a lot in the comics as natural disasters like hurricanes or, these things that we're seeing, increasingly every year, and how like we react to that. So even the pandemic for the last few years has directly influenced some of the stories, and some of the ideas going into like how people would respond to something like this. So that was as much of a concept as there is one. It was just what would this be like for the average person, who's not necessarily the type of character you get the spotlight on in your typical sci-fi action movie or daikaiju film.
Right. Yeah. So again, one of the other functions that I find with the anthology format is that you have a bunch of collaborators that you've worked with across the first 3 issues. So why don't you tell us a little about your collaborators? How did you get the opportunity to work with, frankly, a very diverse and widespread group of creators?
Yeah, so when I started coming up with the anthology, I started just sending out kind of just like cold direct messages to artists that I followed and enjoyed their work on Instagram and Twitter. And I was very fortunate. So for issue 1, Andre Diaz, he had done a picture of a giant monster humping a building, which I just thought was hilarious. And it was sort of the weird kind of humor, like dark humor that I like, just in this one image. So I reached out to him and he took a big leap of faith with me. I kind of let him know up front, like, I've never done a Kickstarter before. I've never self-published before. I don't know what's going to happen. I would like to be able to pay you, this much as a page rate, but that's kind of dependent on how well the Kickstarter does. And so thankfully that first one, so far all of them, because I'm paying my collaborators what I consider a decent page rate, I've broken even after shipping and printing costs, which is great for me that I've been able to, support the artists that have come onto the book in that way. But yeah, so he kind of jumped in the deep end with me on that first issue. We got Hassan Atsman El-Hal, apologies if I said the name wrong, who is now, he's the editor of the Eisner Award-winning comics journal Panel by Panel. He has a YouTube channel called Strip Panel Naked, and he does a lot of lettering, like professional lettering for, real comics, from Boom and IDW and other publishers. So getting him to work on this book early on, I was very fortunate that I had been aware of him through his YouTube channel, and thankfully he was able to fit this into his schedule and has been able to stick with all 4 issues.
Yeah, just flipping through again that first issue, some of that, there's some great lettering, especially in Blind Date. I'm looking on page 2 here, the guy hiding behind the counter, and it's the real wavy, Kim, what are you doing? He's obviously not handling it as well as one would hope for this situation. And just to jump back to Andre Diaz real quick, he did the lead story in the first issue, which is Hybrid Theory. And what struck me about that was that it is a little cartoony. It has a definite indie comics sort of feel to it, but I love his use of lines. There's a lot of line. A lot of times you get styles that they lean towards the cartoony and it's more of a minimal use of line. Mm-hmm. But he's got a lot of nice lines in there. Just flipping through the book, like the some of the details of Madrid. I believe it's Madrid is the setting here.
Yeah.
In flames, all the details in the brick. on the buildings and on the bodies of the hybrids. It really is it does a nice heavy use of line. It gives it a nice tactility and texture that's very interesting visually. And the design of his kaiju, which also graces the cover, is just a fantastic, play on the bug monster, right? On a Kamakuris type of bug monster. In this case, kind of a praying mantis sort of motif. So that one, I said, obviously being the first story, the first issue, this is the first one I read, and it definitely jumped out and it got my interest for sure.
Yeah, I gotta say, Andre, I knew this was gonna work out when I had sent him the script and some very, very rough thumbnail sketches that I had done. I had left it open-ended where this would take place, and so he's from Spain, so he set it in Madrid. That was his choice, and then I had drawn the kind of the roughest indication that the giant kaiju in that one had kind of a triangular shaped head and was kind of insect-like, and he just sent me this fully finished colored drawing of the mantis, and I was like, that's perfect. Like his design sensibilities, it was like he was just pulling it right out of my brain.
Yeah.
So even though like all the artists who contribute, different styles, some are more similar to mine, some are more kind of European influenced or manga influenced. But I think that I've tried to kind of create a lot of diversity in the creature designs, but also have some little elements that are reoccurring so that you can kind of see that there might be some sort of connection. Not quite sure where they're coming from yet, not quite sure why they're here, but there's a lot of unique designs, and yet something that kind of holds them together was the idea. And he definitely knocked it out of the park in that first issue. And so everyone coming after that, it got a little bit easier to kind of hone in on what is a stomped kaiju design that kind of fits in this world.
Mm-hmm.
It's been great.
The other creator in the first issue is who has a 2-page short. The end is Matt Strackbean. Apologies if I'm mispronouncing that. And all I can say is that my note when I was reviewing this was mean-spirited in a funny way. And I think that's true of both of the strips that he does in the first couple issues. Is mean-spirited, but in a funny way.
Yeah. So so Matt Strackbein, he's a buddy of mine that we met through the Hellboy Book Club podcast, who have been really supportive of my work over the last few years, and they're a really great fan community. I actually met him in person one year because he lived in Colorado at the time, I think, and he just moved recently. But he came up to Rose City Comic Con and we chatted, and I was still kind of in the process of putting this together. And I wanted to come up with something to kind of just something that would be a little bit different, because in this first issue, the two stories are both very sci-fi action. Mm-hmm. And I wanted something that showed that like this series could be a little bit more than that. It could go a few different directions. So yeah, he did that short little PSA in the back, and he's going to come back and do another one hopefully for issue 4. It's kind of like a nice bookend between the 4 issues.
Yeah, and and I think he has one in issue 2, right? With Slice of Life.
No, that's a different Matt. So that's Matthew Sargent. Yeah.
Oh, Matt Sargent. Okay.
So same initials. Yeah.
Yeah, same initials and same kind of sense of humor. So
yes.
Again, kind of mean-spirited, and that one I will say. So jumping over to Matt Sargent in the second issue, the ending of that legitimately had me laugh out loud. Again, it's awful, but it's so funny that the black humor just overtakes all of it at that.
Yeah,
point.
He pitched that idea to me. We had been going back and forth, and I had this idea of I call them bunker burbs, but like suburbs that were planned neighborhoods that had these kind of like shelters underneath that people could live in if there was a kaiju kind of walking through their city. Mm-hmm. And so he kind of ran with that and pitched this really, really dark idea, which, I mean, I'll go ahead and spoil it because it's been out for a while. But basically, a pizza shop that's doing deliveries to these people who are still living in their bunkers, and they're using ingredients of things that they find that may or may not be something that you would want to eat. And so he pitched me the idea of the cannibalism, and I was like, that's too far. And I thought about it, and I was like, maybe roadkill. Maybe they're making raccoon pepperoni. And then I thought about it a little bit longer. I'm like, no, let's just go all in on the cannibalism aspect. So that one was kind of to show, again, kind of the timeline of these stories is a little unclear. And so I kind of imagine like that's kind of a glimpse at like how bleak things might be getting.
Right. Yeah. And again, that the ending gag was hilarious, but I still like they're doing good business. So obviously things are going okay for some people, But issue 2 also features a couple of other new collaborators, and I'm gonna butcher this name because I know I did when I covered it. But the story Mass has art by Hugo Permuy.
I think so. Yeah, Permuy.
Permuy. Mr. Hugo.
Sure.
We'll just say that. And Mr. Hugo, this was this one again, because obviously I read the first one. I was very excited, went right on to read the second one. And now we've got a sort of grotesque, horrific type of artwork here. Really, the color pops, the use of light and shadow, I really liked. This would look just as much at home in like a straight horror anthology as it does here. And I think that was, again, especially for that story, for that, that kind of claustrophobic story that it's paired with, and that has, the violence and the sex in it. It's a perfect fit as far as the art, and that is a standout story again, and the art really does a great job of conveying like I said, the horror of the entire situation.
Yeah, the kind of the idea behind that was just as simple as co-ed the thing. I mean, that's kind of the basic idea of, again, trying to give people different ideas of what kaiju might be. So like this story specifically is not daikaiju. It's because it's not a giant monster in the same sense of the other stories. And the way that it fits in the rest of the stories is, again, it's very open to interpretation right now, and I like kind of having fun playing with people's expectations and doing something a little bit different. I think that I really like how the first issue turns out, but I think the first 2 issues together kind of give more of an idea of of what I was trying to accomplish with this series.
Yeah, and I can definitely see that, because I had thought at the same time that the second issue kind of expands the human elements of it, right? And really gets us a better idea of what's being done on different levels. And the second story in the second issue, Might, which is art by Guy Pradel. Again, very different. You had said your collaborators had a European influence. I could see a strong European comic style here on this particular issue. But this one, focusing a lot more on the human interactions, right, of the little politics that are still happening, even though the world is facing this crisis. There's still comes down to who gets credit for what, right, and who makes what decision. Sometimes we can't avoid our human nature.
Yeah, that one, he had actually done a 5-page short that I think was supposed to be in a zine that never got published. And I really enjoyed his detailed city landscapes, and that was why I reached out to him. And so we're actually going to include that story that he did, because it didn't end up getting published. We're actually going to fold that into Stomped, and that's going to be one of the backups for issue 4. So I'm excited about that. Yeah. But you can see it on his website already. I'm going to color it so the original is black and white. Cool. But yeah, I had that was one that wasn't even a fully formed idea when I had written the script. It was originally more like a BattleBots scenario where a bunch of different tech companies were trying to create robots that could combat the kaiju, and that was sort of me directly addressing why there are no giant robots in the series. It was kind of like, well, people are going to wonder, because that's such a common aspect,
common trope, I would say. Yeah.
So I was originally going to have a bunch of different robots like fight each other, and then it's the unlikely little robot that wins. And then the story ended up being completely different, and a lot of that was having conversations with Guy and kind of adapting it to fit what I really liked about his art. But yeah, I mean his robot design in this, I mean, I would never think to do soft limbs the way that he did, but that totally feels more real to me than something that might be a more obvious choice. How they kind of have like these like almost like rubber tire kind of bendy octopus legs. Yeah,
it's funny because on the cover to issue 2, you've got the the big giant monster, who I always thought looked it's got kind of the crocodilian and also kind of like a duck face a little bit. Then you've got the tank with the mass. You almost don't even really notice, like you said, the little bot there, but it's like he's right there, and you say he definitely has like that rubbery sort of tentacle look on him, and he's just as strange as anything else on the cover when you get right down to it. Yeah. So I haven't covered issue 3 yet on the show, but I do want to give just a little preview. So there is another new name in issue 3, and that's Joshua Green, who does the line art for the story called Wake. And I thought this was I thought that the combination of his art with your colors, and again, I won't get into the story, it was very, very bold, kind of quirky, very different, obviously, from the other collaborators and the other art styles that we've seen. But I thought it really stood out,
Yeah, that was really fun. Joshua Green is a friend of mine. He lives up in Portland. So we've actually got to hang out a few times, and he tabled with me at Rose City Comic Con this month. That's the first time I've tabled at a comic convention, and I got to say, like, I probably would have chickened out and not even done it if I didn't have someone there to hang out with. So that was really great. I was really happy with that he was able to do that backup story in that issue, and I don't have anything locked down yet, but I'm sure we'll definitely collaborate again in the future.
Very, very cool. The thing about tabling at a Comic-Con, now I say this as a podcaster and I've not done it, but it is funny sometimes the connections that you make, because the artist Joey Weiser, who did the artwork for the podcast, Eisner Award nominated artist, has done a lot of different stuff with SpongeBob and some other licensed stuff, but also, of course, had his series Merman and some of the other all ages books he's done. Him and I met because he had a table at Heroes Con, and he had what he calls the Kaiju alphabet, where he did an A to Z little sketches of different monsters for each letter of the alphabet. And I happened to see that from across the aisle and started talking to him, and now he's one of my collaborators. So it's amazing the connections that you made. Like you said, you had your eyes open to the wide world, and it really is. There's more. I try to tell this to people. There's more to comics than just Marvel and DC, guys. There's a lot of good stuff out there in the medium. So we've got the Kickstarter for number 4 starting, I said, very soon after we're recording this. And you've given us some of the, some stuff that we can kind of expect to see. So what is there anything else you want to hype that's coming up in not only in the 4th issue, but maybe for the future of Stomped?
Yeah. So the 4th issue is going to be one more new to Stomped artist. Dominic Black is drawing one of the stories, and I am going to be drawing the second story. And this issue is very different. It's definitely more in the lines of some of the backups, where it's a little bit more slice of life human aspect. There's still giant monsters, but it's kind of got a different flavor still to it than some of the previous issues. This issue 3 was definitely more of the action issue, kind of like the first one, and this one is a little bit swinging more into the horror and a little bit of that claustrophobia, paranoia aspect of things. And it's definitely, this one is the one that's like probably the strongest influence of the experience of the pandemic as well.
For sure. Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm curious to see what people think about it, but since it's currently the last issue of Stomp that I have planned, I wanted to kind of go all out. So I have some fun things that I will be hopefully rolling out in terms of stretch goals and things with the campaign. But I'm including. So this one, each issue has had 2 main 12-page stories and then 1 backup. In the first issue, it was the 2-pager, but in issues 3 and 4, it's been 6-pagers. So this issue has another 6-page backup that's drawn by Chris Dore, and then the story that Guy had done prior to working on Stomped that he graciously is allowing me to include in this next issue, because I feel like more people need to see this. And then I'm gonna try to cram it with even more stuff, maybe more pinups, more artwork. I want to try to find a way to include everyone who's collaborated with me on this series so far. So I'm still, even though it's only a week away, I'm still kind of hashing out the details, trying to figure out what I can realistically do in terms of page count. But yeah, I'm excited to see how it does. We've been able to increase our funding with each new campaign, and so I'm hoping we can do that again on this 4th one. And then in terms of the future for Stomped, I still want to get back and do the original story that I had the idea to do years ago. Now, where that fits into my schedule, we'll find out. I always juggle a lot of projects at the same time and kind of follow whichever one has the most momentum. But I'm really hoping that I can sit down and get that done within the next couple of years. I did my first longest graphic novel I've done so far. It's a 60-page Lucha Libre comic Milagro that I did in 2021.
Yep. And
so I know I can do it. Like I've done it. I've tackled a 60-page project. I know I could do something of that length, and I know what I need to do to get that done. Working my art schedule around my day job. So it's just a matter of just committing to doing it and deciding if I want to release it as a mini series or get it all done in one big chunk. So that'll be telling basically the origin story of Kim Corrigan, and from there I have a lot of ideas. I have a kind of a rough outline of how all these stories that have appeared in the anthology could all sort of the connective tissue could start to be a little bit more obvious, how they all feed into each other in this larger narrative. So yeah, hopefully I'll be able to keep doing this for years to come. Kind of just depends on whether or not there's still the readers and the support for it, and because I would love to just keep doing this.
Yeah, for sure. So you did mention some stretch goals. Any hype you want to put out for anything you want to hype that we can look forward to during the campaign? Or are you going to keep them under wraps?
I want to do a fold out page.
Yeah.
I think that the printer that they go through, they have advertised that they do them, and so I'm thinking about including that as a stretch goal. It would be a fold-out page that has a size comparison chart of all the kaiju that have appeared in the series so far. So
that'd be wonderful.
That's the big thing that I've been mentioning it to my collaborators, and they all seem to really dig that idea. So it's just a matter of whether or not I can get that done and hit that goal. So we'll see.
For sure. And I can tell you that Daikaiju fans love to compare how big things are. And I don't mean that as a pejorative. I mean, if they say, hey, this guy's taller than this guy, and this guy weighs more than that guy, but this guy's faster than that guy. We love our monster data like that. So you mentioned Milagro, which I back that. That is a wonderful OGN. And I know you've got some other stuff going on. What other projects you got going on? I know you were doing some work with Webtoon.
Yeah, so that's the other project that I started kind of on a whim almost. I've never really thought I would get into the superhero genre in terms of my creator-owned work. Obviously, if I got an opportunity to work at Marvel or DC, I'd take it in a heartbeat, just for the experience. But in terms, I've never really thought of myself as the guy who wanted to create his own superhero universe. Right. But I saw that Webtoon was doing a contest, and the prompt was just an action scene. And for some reason, the idea of doing a superhero story in that Webtoon format, which is so different than a traditional comic book, seemed really exciting and fun to me. And so, I started a Webtoon series called Spandex. There's 2 episodes up right now. The 3rd episode is completed, but I can't post it until their contest is ended at the end of this month. And then I'm hoping to be able to kind of continue that next year on maybe a every other week basis. Kind of have to see. I'm still trying to figure out a style that I can draw in that would allow me to produce it that quickly.
Yes.
Along with other things I'm doing. But I definitely want to continue that, because once I started working on it, a lot of ideas that I had buried in the back of my head for years, all kind of okay, now I could do this and now I could do that.
Yep.
It's really just a excuse to embrace the thing that kids love about superheroes, which is that anything goes.
Yes.
There's superheroes. It's not really even a genre so much. It is like an umbrella under which all genres can crash into each other. Right. And so that's that. I'm going to try to have fun with that, where it's definitely got a lot of soap opera kind of melodrama in the characters' storylines, very much in the vein of the classic X-Men stories and things.
I was going to say, as one expects, if one read comics in the 80s and 90s, we, especially teen comics, right? We expect all that interpersonal soapy stuff, right?
Yep. So that's it. It's kind of like a way to just kind of indulge the stuff that, most of the ideas that I have, I like to play in different genres and kind of stick to a certain kind of tone to, I guess. Like I kind of sometimes I guess my writer brain is different than my artist brain. The things that I like to write don't always mesh with the things that I like to draw. So this Spandex, the Webtoon, is an excuse for me to just draw whatever I want to draw. Right.
And I agree that Webtoon format, I've read a few series on Webtoon, and I'd found Webtoon because Fabian Nicieza was doing a series on there. It was when I first was introduced to it. And then Archie actually has a series called Big Ethel Energy that they've been running for a long time on that. So when you started posting about it on your Twitter, I was like, oh, well, this is a natural fit. Because like you say, I also love the Webtoon format. It's so different as someone that grew up reading comics, thinking of a single issue comic and how you lay out pages and stuff, but now laying it out vertically, right, instead of horizontally, but you still can use that energy. I really like it, and Spandex is a lot of fun, and I enjoyed that one quite a bit. I know people think, well, you're just that monster guy, right, or you're just that war comics guy, right? I read superheroes too, but so I think everybody does to an extent if you're of a certain age. But in any event, all right, well, that's Now we've talked about Stomped, we've talked about the work. Now we got to get serious. All right. Well, who's your favorite movie monster and your favorite monster movie?
So I gotta say, it's hard for me to pick a favorite because I think monsters can be so many things. I would say that one of the biggest, earliest influences on me Star Wars, obviously, the creatures in the Star Wars films,
For sure.
but Gremlins. Gremlins is something that stuck with me. I used to have nightmares about them. I don't know how old I was when I saw that first movie, but I just always loved the Gremlins, and which is, you know, the opposite of Daikaiju. Instead of giant monster, tiny little monsters. But that one's the one that, like, I think, you know, I would rewatch it through college and things, and it holds up. The humor and stuff that I didn't pick up on when I was a kid. You know, it's always fun to revisit something that you have a nostalgia for, and you find out, oh, like, I can appreciate this on a different level now.
Right.
So that one would probably be a big one. Now in terms of Daikaiju, since I have recently binge watched every single Godzilla film, every single Gamera film, I watched Ultra Q in the first season of Ultraman, and then a bunch of others. I gotta say that out of the Showa era, Hedra is one that stands out to me, just because that movie was so bizarre.
Yes.
It just, watching all those films back to back, a lot of them kind of blur together in my mind.
Right.
But that one was so different, and that monster design was so unique that one kind of stands out to me. And also, anytime a monster transforms, like, that's always a ton of fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny with Godzilla versus Hedra, because, you know, my brother and I, we covered that film on the show. And I think we both came to the conclusion that film had such a poor reputation in this country. I don't know about Japan, but in the West, it had such a poor reputation for such a long time that now it's really starting to be rediscovered and reevaluated. And you see a lot of people, especially, again, maybe newer fans to the genre, or even younger fans, saying, wow, they really are attracted to Hedra, and the story in that movie is so, you know, Yoshimitsu Banno, he sticks to his guns, right? He's not backing off. He's not doing anything, you know, any half steps when it comes to the story that he's telling there. So yeah, Hedra is, you can't, I mean, definitely from the unique aspect, but also just, I think Hedra has held up. I think it helps that, unfortunately, some of the ecological problems we had in 1971 we're kind of still looking at now in 2022. So I think it makes him, he's always timely, right? So very good. Well, Ross, thank you so much for sitting down virtually with me here to talk about Stomped and the upcoming Kickstarter. And well, I will definitely put links in the show notes and on my social media to the Kickstarter campaign, so everyone can go and click that notified button and be ready to go once it launches. Do you want to share where people can find you on the internet, your social media presence, or your personal sites?
Yeah, I have my own website, so it's just www.rossradke.com, ROSSRADKE. I have an online store there where after we finish the Kickstarter for issue 4, any extra copies that I have of Stomped will be available through there, and then digital copies will also be available. And you can actually go on there and download the digital copies of issues 1 and 2.
Yep.
And I've also posted sometimes some original art and stuff there as well. I'm pretty active on Twitter, and I still post things pretty regularly on Instagram. My Twitter handle is, I think it's RT Radke.
I believe so.
But yeah, generally, if you just look my name up, it'll pop up, and I pretty much post artwork daily. I draw every day. I chip away at the comics I'm working on, but I also give myself other projects to do. Right now, I'm kind of lagging behind on this Soup Timber daily art challenge that I created to give myself it's not like a palette cleanser, whatever my big project is that I'm working on, which right now is the 4th issue of Stomped. I like to have something that I can kind of switch gears and kind of do a little bit of something different. So
right.
Yep, that's where you can find me. And yeah, I appreciate it. Everyone who's supported the series so far. And this is going to be the last opportunity to guarantee you can get print copies, because after this campaign, I'm not going to be printing any more copies of the anthology in the single issue form. Right. Hopefully, we'll be able to eventually do a collected edition, but that'll be a ways away. and digital will be available. But if you got to have your print copy, then this will be your last opportunity. So don't miss out.
Yeah, that was what my situation, because I picked up 1 and 2 digitally, and I liked them so much. I think I reached out and I said, hey, can we get physicals? And he said, well, we're going to do the campaign, and you'll be able to pick up the physicals during the campaign for 3. And that's what I did. And so I said, I just enjoyed them so much. I was more than happy to buy them twice, to get the digital and the physical on these. And like I said, I am, I'm not just a hype man. I'm also a fan. I'm very much looking forward to the Kickstarter for number 4 as well, and seeing what goodies are therein. Ross, thank you again for sitting down with us. Really appreciate it, and I hope that everybody out there checks out the Kickstarter campaign, checks out the online store, and takes a look at Stomped. Again, I know it's a little off the beaten path, kind of an indie book sort of thing, but and Russ, you made mention of this, the breadth and width of the comic scene. I love anytime I can discover or something that's new to me, right? That's I haven't seen before, and for have it to be giant monsters, that's just icing on the cake for a guy like me. So, everyone, thank you for listening. I'm gonna put, as I said, the links to the Kickstarter campaign and Ross's website and social media in the show notes. I'll put those on my social media as well. So if you follow me on Twitter at @LJacone, you'll be able to see the links there. And this episode, I'm going to port this over to the YouTube channel as well. So if you go and you follow Destruction Directive on YouTube, you'll be able to find the links there. So one more time, thank you very much for sitting down with us, Ross. And we're very much all looking forward to Stomped number 4.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a huge honor to me for you to cover this series, because, like I said, I'm relatively new fan. I think that I did my homework, not to be gatekeepy or anything, but it's nice to know that someone who has been a lifelong fan of the genre, who definitely knows their stuff, to find something to love about this and find something like new. That means a lot to me. It makes it worth doing. So appreciate that.
Oh, no problem, man. I'll always support. Like I said, if you like something, go out there and support it. If you're an artist or a creator that you like their stuff, support them any way that you can. So, all right. Well, that's all I've got. Again, thank you, Ross, for joining us. We're going to sign off. Everybody come on back next time. Not sure what we're going to be covering next time, because this is a Gaiden. But until then, keep them stomping.
This has been Earth Destruction Directive, a Daikaiju podcast, produced and created by me, Luke Giaconetti, as part of the Two True Freaks Internet Radio Network, available at twotruefreaks.com. This is a fan work celebrating the history and culture of Japanese giant monsters. All movies, TV shows, comic books, characters, and other intellectual property is copyright their respective copyright holders, and no infringement is intended or implied. If you would like to send an email to the show, you can email me at earthdestructiondirective@yahoo.com. I try to respond to all emails, and if you send in some comments, I will read them on the show. All episodes of Earth Destruction Directive can be found at twotruefreaks.com. You can also find the show on your favorite podcatcher. Just search for Earth Destruction Directive. You can even leave a review on your podcatcher of choice if you'd like. You can find me on Facebook. Just search for first name Luke, last name EDD. You can also get in touch with me on Twitter. Just search for the handle @LJacone. That's LJACONE. The theme song for this podcast is Future Gladiator by Kevin MacLeod, downloaded from Incompetech.com, licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 4.0 license. Thanks for listening, and be sure to come back next time for more city-stomping fun here on Earth Destruction Directive. Tune in next time to hear the crusty old podcaster from Oklahoma say,
"There's a WTF moment if I ever saw one.